All right. You know what it is. You know who it is. We're back. Another episode. Welcome back to another episode of the VG Perform podcast with my co-host, Gerald Hayes.
Yes,
Jerry.
yes. Week was good, busy, getting a lot of shit done at work, getting my workouts in. I may or may not be getting sick right now, and I don't want to deal with that shit, but we're gonna keep powering through and we're gonna keep working out and we're gonna come out on top.
I think it was food poisoning or something early last week, but I worked through it. I'm feeling good now. We're feeling healthy. We're killing it. We got the website is published. I know Jerry had told me that last week. I mentioned that it wasn't published yet and it was going to be. Website is live, so if you want to go check that out, it's bgperform.com. I got lucky with the
Woo.
website.
Yeah, that's actually sick.
It was available when I made it, so we're good.
Nice. Nice.
Beautiful. But yeah, check out all the stuff on there. I actually have to add Jerry to that this week, which I will do. And yeah, so today we're going to be talking about how to get more out of your training and nutrition programs, right? Last week we talked about running. We talked about, you know, the I well, 2 weeks ago we talked about running and how to introduce it into your life. This past week we talked about strength training that goes along with running. And today I want to talk about how we can get the most out of our training and nutrition programs that we follow. And maybe in the coming weeks we can do nutrition and we can talk a little bit more about that because I don't think we've really done any podcasts specifically on nutrition as of yet. But yeah, so today we're going to do a 32-minute AMTAP. Again, diving into how to get more out of our training and nutrition programs. Jerry, are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
All right. Three,
Get that timer up there.
1, boom.
Let's go.
All right. So when we start to talk about like getting more out of our strength or our training and nutrition programs, there's obviously some basic ways, right? And I think the ways that I want to talk about today are things that everybody knows, and I think everybody, for the most part, thinks about, but they either don't execute on, or I don't know, it's just kind of one of those things where it's like right in front of your face that you're just like, I don't really know, right? Or they're just lazy, if we're being honest. But these are really outside the normal ways, which I would say are like obviously intensity, right? Like going harder inside of your training sessions because that's not always the case. And that's not always the answer. And then in nutrition, you know, the answer that everyone seems to want to get right now is like just eat less calories or just eat less, and that's again not always the case, right? It might in theory make sense, and sometimes it is the answer, but sometimes it's not, and sometimes there's other things that are actually going into this that we need to account for outside of just eat less, right? And I think that you and I both can agree on this that there's too much. Obviously, like I personally like to break training and nutrition down as simple as possible. But with some of the stuff, it's just not as simple as like go harder in the gym or just eat less, right?
Hmm.
Like it's just something that doesn't always equate to success, and especially long term, if we're talking about actual long-term success inside of fitness, right? So I think, one of the first things I always go to in regards to like we can start with more of what I wrote down. We can start with the nutrition stuff, but um, nutrition, I think, is one where people struggle with a lot, right? Because I think it's very easy to get more out of your training program, which we'll talk about. But I think nutrition is one where it's like, okay, sometimes it's just not as simple as like eat less, right? And sometimes there's a lot of other factors that go into it, right? My number one being, food choices, right? So if you want to get more out of a nutrition program, because sometimes you go to a coach and you're like, hey, I want to lose weight, right? Or I want to gain weight or whatever. You just want to eat healthier. And they'll hand you like a calorie sheet or a set of macros that's like, how many calories am I eating a day? What are the protein, carbs, and fats going to be inside of that? Proteins, carbs, fats, actually. I actually checked out his Instagram the other day. I haven't looked at him forever. This is
You still
just,
making stuff?
oh, yeah, he is, yeah. Engagement's really low though. He's got like 670,000 followers and he's gotten like 15 comments on his picture. So I don't know. Might be
Damn,
past his days.
maybe a
Past.
little bit. I saw the last time I saw him, he was growing a beard. He's looking
He's still got
like,
the beard. He's still got the beard.
yeah, looking
But yeah,
Viking
so
like.
like, you know, when you're just getting handed like a calorie sheet and it's just saying like, you have to consume this much of this much calories, this much proteins, this much carb, this much fat, it can get very like overwhelming at times, right? Or it starts to get to a point where it becomes very, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like
Redundant?
intrusive.
Oh,
Like it's just like it starts to take over every single piece of your life. And the goal with a nutrition program or, just following some type of macro or micronutrient, uh, I guess, standard, right, is to improve your life and get to the goals that you want to get. And food choices is obviously going to be one that is very simple, like pick better foods, but it's just so important. You know what I mean? It's like it's as simple as like this is literally just like what are we picking? What are we buying? What are we consuming? And like this is on a regular basis. Like when and where are we buying our foods? When we do, what are we choosing? Are we choosing the easy options? Are we choosing ones that they might be a little bit, harder to make, but they're gonna in the long run be better for us, right? And there's always gonna be a medium that we have to find within this stuff. But if we can improve the food choices, it kind of it almost takes half the battle out for us in regards to improving our nutrition because a lot of the things that happen inside of nutrition is more or less like the choices we're making inside like the food, right? Like for example, it's like I think if we really kind of boiled it down to what people do wrong in nutrition, like if we really are what they do right, a lot of people do a lot of stuff really good, right? They eat meats, they're eating some vegetables, they're eating, they're not eating a ton of carbs or they're eating like the right carbs and things like that. But then when you actually look at what they're eating, it's like they're eating French fries, which are fried in oils, or they're eating chicken that's fried, or they're eating, steak with a lot of fat, or they're eating um, high fat content fat. So it's like instead of getting like 93.7% beef, they're getting like 80/20, right? And it's these types of things where it's like, oh, well, I'm eating meat or I'm eating vegetables or I'm eating carbs, that type of thing, where it's like, yes, in theory, yes, but like we can make better decisions and improve that, right? If you go from, I don't know the exact number, but if you go from like an 80/20 beef down to a 93/7, meaning percentage, right? So when I say that 80/20 means 80% like of the meat and then 20% fat. And the same thing for 97 or 93/7, which is 93% and then 7% fat inside of like the container that you buy. That's, you're looking at probably a difference of in the whole thing like 300 to 400 calories. Am I right? Or it might be a little bit
it
more.
adds up a lot. I don't know the total. I'd have to look at it, and it obviously
I might be
will.
undershooting it there, and it might be way more, but like it's a lot, and especially with things like fat, where they're very dense in calories, and you're buying a meat that's like I said 80/20, and you're eating it, and you're not thinking about it, and you're like, oh, okay, well I'm eating meat, right? These are the little things, right? And now we have to kind of find, with that being said, because this is another thing that bothers me, is that like people will go to, get help nutritionally and it's as simple as like, yeah, I need to make better food choices. But, you know, what are their what's their capacity inside of buying food, right? Because, nicer meats cost more money, right? And nicer options cost more money. So it's like, where is it that we are at with our finances? Where is it that we're at with our, decision making? Because if it comes down to it and it's like, hey, I don't have the money, then it's like, okay, well, where can we kind of find the in between on this, right? Whether it's, do we have a different option? What's the best option we can get for the place that we're at? Or can we kind of make some room so that we can get that better option food wise, right? And I think that the food choices, again, it's a very simple thing to start with, but it's very important because in a nutrition program, half the battle is literally the quality of the food that you eat. Because if you eat better quality food, it's going to be less calories, it's going to be more nutrient dense, and you're not going to have to worry about it as much. Does that make sense? Anything to add to that?
You don't put cheap oil in a Ferrari, all right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. And I think that goes along with that, like on top of the food choices, is again, like I said, the food and like cooking skills, right? I think this is another big thing that people just fuck up all the time. It's like I would love to eat, certain foods every single night, but like I don't have those skills in the kitchen and like there might be people that we start to give advice to And it might be as simple as like just make chicken, just make beef, just make whatever. They might not have the skills, they might not have the resources, they might not have the the things they need to like make the food, right? And again, there's both ways you can go with this. Like you could obviously be like, well, then just make it work, like sacrifice and make it work. But also there's times when people just really don't have the resources for it and they have to make do with what they have. So it's like, how do we help them, get the most out of their training program, right? Or their nutrition program? Like, how do we help them get the most? It's building a framework of great food choices, as great as we can get, with tactics that fit their skills in the kitchen, right? And what I mean by that is, again, most people can cook rice. Most people can, bake chicken. Most people can make eggs. Most people can cook ground beef or ground chicken or ground turkey. Like those are very simple. So it's like that makes a lot of sense. Like maybe that's where we're trying to organize or recommend things. And we're not saying, okay, well, I want you to have, you know, uh, some ridiculous meal that has like specific calories and make it taste good. Because I think that's one thing that I see. I see a lot of people who like on Instagram who make a big name for themselves in regards to like making meals that taste good while also like having good macros, right? And there's a lot of stuff that obviously goes into that. There's a lot of time, cook up or cleanup time, cooking time, packing time, and obviously these are sacrifices that people need to make, right? But I hate that it's just like this kind of just one-sided argument where it's just like, oh, it's just this. Like you just have to make it taste good. And it's like, well, it's not that simple to just make it taste good because I've cooked for myself for years now and like, it's just not something I'm interested in learning, like to making like getting to that level. And it sometimes it can be a pain in the ass. You know what I mean? It can be a pain in the ass to clean and have to do all that stuff and put it away. And I know that like for you, for example, you're someone who enjoys it to a certain extent and has a good system with it. I think because I've been traveling so much and because of like I haven't had my own place that was like mine for a very long time, I've kind of had to get very creative with the places that I go, right? And try to figure out like how do I make this work nutritionally, right? While also traveling and when I can, making sure that I have all the things that I need to keep on track with my goals and obviously improve, right? I think for you, I want you to kind of, chime in on this because you're someone who I see consistently who has been able to do it. And, maybe not recently, but like as of, the last few years, you've been really on top of like the food prep, getting it done, kind of your system for that and what you find to be like easy and hard about it.
I hate meal prep so fucking much. I'll be the first to admit it. As a coach, I love like eating healthy meals and like I feel better in the gym when I am eating healthier and I feel like my performance doesn't suffer from it. And that's what keeps me doing it. Like if I have a Saturday night and I got like a few hours, like let's say 2 hours at night where I could just cook something nice, dude, I'll cook up the nice, juiciest steak and I'll give it the most love and attention and like
Very
I'll even
just
put it in the
it's
fridge and marinate it like a day before. Like I love cooking one single meal and just making it the best. For some reason, when you add more, more plates, more cleanup, I'm just like, I don't want to do anything, dude. I don't want to do it. But the thing that helps me the most is keeping it simple, like 3 to 5 ingredients per meal. I like to I like to go like I can eat a lot of similar things through weeks without having an issue like getting sick of it. So for a week I'll eat like the same food. The next week I'll change like one of the ingredients and it'll taste completely different to me and I'm fine with it. Or the seasoning that I put on the meat, for example, will be different one week from the last and it'll just taste like a completely new dish. I'd say becoming more comfortable with seasonings and low calorie sauces is going to be the best thing to help you with your meal prep and staying consistent because it's going to taste good. And when you're eating food that tastes good, you're like, man, I can make that again. And it'll
Mhm.
just keep you going back. And then obviously when you're getting into the mindset of like, dude, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, just remember why you started. That's the biggest thing. Just like going to the gym. If you lose motivation going to the gym, ask yourself why you started, and then you kind of just snap out of that mindset and you just get it done.
Yeah, and I think like I said with the meal prep, it doesn't have to be crazy. When I talk to most people who get into meal prep, I always tell them to pick one meal or whatever meal they seem to struggle with the most. I think for a lot of people, it's like lunch. because breakfast usually they're home and you don't have to, a lot of foods that people eat for breakfast, yogurts, eggs, things like that, they're very quick and simple. And then dinners for the most part are like, people are again are home or they're easier to kind of get to. Lunch is where people I think start to make a lot of mistakes is because like they're at work and there's a lot of fast food options and they don't have a lot of time and they're rushing and they skip it. And that's where things kind of like, fall apart. You don't have to eat like so specific in regards to like breakfast, lunch, dinner, but that kind of like middle of the if you work a normal job for the most part, you're gonna have that breakfast time, that lunch time, and then that dinner time, and that's where the average meals come in, and that's where people mess up for the most part. Is like they have a decent breakfast, and then their lunch goes shit, and then they just say fuck it for dinner, right? And they're just like they just kind of like flow with it, and then you see it where it's like they have a nice dinner or the breakfast, and they have a nice lunch, and then they usually have a nice. It's like it's a domino effect with that stuff, really.
Hmm.
But I think obviously we talked about the food choices, right? The food and cooking skills, meal prepping, things like that. Like that's all part of it. If you don't have any experience meal prepping, it's going to be really hard to just start in meal prepping, right? Like you're going to have to build up some capacity. And if someone you're working with is I guess they're not conscious of that, it's going to be very difficult for you to actually get a lot out of the program. Now, I will say this, right? I'm kind of giving some excuses right now, but at the end of the day, you have to get these skills if you want to improve on this stuff. You know what I mean? Like you can't bypass these skills. So like eventually you have to learn. What I'm saying is like if you're new or you're just starting or you're working with a coach, like these are the things you have to be aware of if you want to get the most out of these programs. And if you are a coach and you're working with someone, these are the things you have to kind of listen to and be aware of before you actually like start to recommend shit to people, right? Like,
One of my biggest piece of advice for starting meal prep is start
mhm.
with lunches.
Yeah,
That's the easiest thing. Because like dinner, if you get home at night, you could always cook like a single meal. But usually when you're at work, lunch is like you don't want to be like, oh, I guess I'll just order something today.
yeah,
Start with lunches and just meal prep that. Once you get really used to it, if you want to add like dinners into it, absolutely like meal prep your lunches, dinners. This way you could just heat it up, whatever. But lunches are usually where people fall out of that good habit that they're building the most because they try to order something when they're at work or they're on the go. So lunches are always going to be a good place to start.
yeah. I think like the kind of good segue into this, like the last piece that I want to talk about for nutrition is like eating behaviors, right? It's do are you aware and do you know like when and why you eat, right? Like I think one of the things that I noticed as I traveled more and I had a little bit more time and I wasn't like running throughout my day was like sometimes I was just eating just to eat. Like I was just bored or I was just like sitting there and I was like, oh, or like you watch a video and you're like, wow, that looks good. Now I'm hungry. I kind of want something to eat. Like, are you conscious of when you're eating, why you're eating, how you're eating, right? Is it in big bunches? Is it little things? Because I even have periods sometimes now where it's like, you get those little snacky vibes, right? And then it's like you have a little bit of this and then a little bit of that and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And then if you were to go back, there's an extra, 500 to 1,000 calories you just had in a span of 15 minutes by like little small things that you're eating, right? And I think that's something where it's like, this is more emotional than anything, but like these eating behaviors are oftentimes, you know, enhanced by poor decisions, poor cooking skills, and just kind of putting yourself in bad positions with your planning for the meals, right? So I'd say like to kind of summarize this part is like if you're joining a nutrition program, if you're starting a nutrition program, or you've had one before and you've fallen off or you struggle, if you focus on these things, it's going to make it a lot easier, right? So make better food choices as much as you can, right? Just try to, I look at it like as simple as if I'm eating a sleeve of Oreos every night, don't eat a full sleeve, right? And then dwindle that
Don't
down
do
to
a
like
full line. Don't
a
do a
quarter
line.
sleeve, then dwindle that down to like a couple, then try to totally get that out of the way, right? Then it's the same thing of like if we're eating, for example, what are we looking at? Like trying to think of like a meat quality that might be good like chicken, right? Like a high fat chicken, right? Like maybe instead of eating like fried chicken, we're going into like a baked chicken or like chicken with the skin that's not like fried chicken skin, right? Maybe then we're taking off the chicken skin and we're kind of moving in that direction where it's like we're just making it leaner and trying to improve the flavors with like the spices like Jerry was talking about. Like those types of things are really beneficial long term to actually help us. And then as we learn skills, we can slowly add them in, right? Like again, we don't have to be Gordon Ramsay on the first night, but the whole goal is to be like, okay, well, like I know how to cook a chicken. Like maybe I can try to make potatoes. Now it's like I know how to make potatoes and chicken. Maybe I can, add some rice. How, you can buy pretty much like frozen vegetables, so those are fairly simple for the most part. Or you can learn to like cut up vegetables and make them that way, right? Like take your time, learn these skills, and if not, again, you have to find a way to improve the either the where you're investing the time and money, because it's very simple to be like, all right, I know how to cook meat and I really enjoy cooking meat, but I hate everything else. So it's like, maybe you're buying like a simpler version of rice and vegetables, right? Or it's like I don't know how to make meat and everything else is very simple. Maybe you're buying pre-made meats that are like cooked, or you're buying meats that are like have good macros. Like at Costco, I remember they used to have this like sliced beef. It was like sliced sirloin that was like pre-cooked, and all you really had to do was warm it up. And it was so simple, right? And it was just like something like that where it's like go spend a little bit extra money, maybe buy it in bulk and have it so you don't have to worry about upkeep with it, right?
Buy a
Because
Costco rotisserie chicken for $5.
yeah,
Like
like
those things last, dude. You can get like
those
five
do have a
meals
lot
out
of
of
fat
that.
though. Those do have a lot of
Yeah,
fat.
yeah,
Like
true, true,
that's,
true.
you're gonna, yeah. But you just have to be careful with those. But
Yeah,
they
yeah,
are
yeah.
they are good for the most part. Um, but I'm not saying they're bad, but it's just like they can be pretty high calorie.
Yeah, they are. They throw a lot of butter on that shit. But
Yeah,
if you
yeah, yeah.
don't have like
It's
any
fucking good.
options and
When
you're
I was
really
I was in
struggling,
college, oh my God, I was in college and I was like last year of college, like last 6 months, I was just like, fuck, I need to study. And I was just taking rotisserie chickens downstairs into the study room and I was just eating them while I was studying all the time.
dude, I
Uh,
was I was literally like if I got one of those, I was taking away from fat from the rest of the day. Like I looked at all my macros and I was like, I'm gonna take that out, take that out, take that out, and I was plugging it in. And
yeah.
it worked out fine. You can make it work.
Yeah. I mean, those are like you said, $5 for probably like those are probably like 2,000 calories, like a whole thing.
Yeah, probably. I wouldn't even
I would assume.
know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think those types of things are super important. And if you can put them in a way where you're taking away a lot of the difficulty of the skill, you're going to get so much more and you can just focus on the actual program at hand, right? Imagine if I told you all you had to worry about, you have all these other skills. Like this is the thing. If you have all the other skills, then looking at the proteins, carbs, and fat, so much simpler, right? And it takes so much weight off your chest. But if you, on top of having to worry about protein, carbs, and fat, have to worry about how you're going to cook it, if you can even cook it, if you have like a pan and shit like that, that helps, all that stuff. Like if you don't have these other tools, that's going to look so much more daunting than it actually is as a, nutrition program, right? And then on top of that, one of the last things, just kind of like throw it in, time restricted eating is something that always helps in regards to kind of like getting more out of your nutrition program. If you're struggling with keeping yourself into a calorie range or something like that, you can always kind of restrict the time that you do eat throughout the day. Stop eating earlier, start eating later in the day, something like that. That always usually helps me. So just something to kind of add on top of that. Anything else?
I would say another thing you could start with using those websites like allrecipes.com.
Hmm.
You could look up like easy to follow crockpot recipes, and those will tend to be really because you don't really need a lot of skill to throw something in a crock pot and let it cook all day. So
Yeah,
that's another thing to look into is like
definitely.
a
Yeah,
cheaper
good point.
crock pot.
Good point. Yeah, and I think like for the last 10 minutes, I think for me, if there's any other nutrition stuff you guys need to, obviously just hit us up and we can always add to this. But, you know, training to me is fairly simple, right? I think like if you get the most out of your nutrition, I think you're going to get more out of your training, right? If we're being 100% honest, the better the nutrition is, the better the training is going to be. For a while, you can out train a bad diet, that type of thing, or you can, just train if you don't really have any aesthetic goal or anything like that. But if you do have an aesthetic goal or you do have, some specific event or thing that you want to get better for, you have to improve the nutrition, right? And you have to put yourself in a position where you're fueling your body correctly, right? And this is something I've learned from running is that like I think I've had runs where I don't eat before and I had runs where I've eaten before. And the runs where I don't eat before, I feel so bad. It's not even funny. Like I had a run in Brazil when I was there. Or speaking of which, I don't even think I said this. I'm back in New York for a while. Um, Not traveling at the moment, but anyways, um, when I was in Brazil, I had a 12-mile run and I was like, oh, I'll just get a Gatorade and I'll just go downstairs and I'll just run. And I got to like 8 miles and I was like, holy, I cannot go anymore. Like I'm so tired. I'm dead. And I had to stop for a second. I had to rest, and then I did another mile, and it was just so heavy. Like I was just struggling so bad. And then the treadmill reset, and I was like, "Oh my God, because my watch was a little bit ahead of the treadmill because like this thing's not always accurate when you're in a treadmill, and I was just going through it. But it's that type of thing where I've learned like the nutrition matters so much because with the weightlifting and things like that, you can kind of push through because you can take a little bit extra rest. You can throw a little less weight on, do a couple less reps, whatever. With the running, it's just like you're just there. You're just
You're
doing
in
it.
it.
If you're not feeling good, you're not gonna perform well, right? So I think that that's the thing where it's like in your training, nutrition is going to always improve it, right? But specifically for training, I think that there's a lot of things we can kind of talk about, but I think obviously number one is intensity, right? Like if you feel like you're not getting a lot out of your sessions or your training program, the number one thing I would always look at is like how much effort are you putting in, right? This doesn't mean go balls to the wall and like 100%, but like can you give more intensity, right? Can you push a little bit harder? Can you add a little bit of weight? Can you add a couple of reps? Maybe add a set. Like where in the program can we add a little bit of intensity that is going to get us that extra push, right? And I've noticed this myself is because sometimes when you train for so long, like the intensity is not always there, right? And there's going to be some months and weeks where we're like, ugh, like, all right, I'm just going to go get this done. And there's going to be some weeks where you're just like, great, this feels amazing, right? But this is why it's so important to kind of have a little bit more of a flow to it. And I like to have a little bit more of like a relaxed flow where like I have an idea of what I want to do and what I want to get done. And the intensity is kind of, moves with how I'm feeling on those days. Like there's some days that I feel great, I go for it 100%. There's some days I'm not feeling the best where it's like, okay, like I'm still going to go for it, but like it's probably going to be, my 10 is probably going to be like a 7 today. And it's just like I'm trying to get what I can and just be smart about it, right? Because one of the things I was actually thinking about this morning is like I love not being hurt. I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to be injured. I don't want to feel that way. And like the training I've been doing for the last 2, 3 years has, really supported me in like not being injured and pushing my body, even with jujitsu and MMA training and running and things like that. Like I've supported myself in a way that I feel like my training right now keeps me very healthy, keeps me balanced, it keeps me moving in the right direction, right? So I think with that, like the intensity is a huge factor, but also the balance of being able to say like I'm pushing really hard. One of the moments I don't have to push hard, right? Intensity should be kept for the right places. The first couple exercises of the day, like let's say the bench, intensity, right? Intensity, push it, try to get what you can out of those sets. Cable face pull, we don't need to be going 110% on a cable face pull for accessories, right? Like just be smart about where that intensity is, and you're going to get a lot more out of your training, right? Anything to add to that?
No, not to that. No.
And I think that, on top of that, like obviously choosing better training, right? Like understanding, like I said, movement selection, understand like going back and listening to our podcast on programming selection. That's a huge thing to get more out of your actual training. And then I think, on top of that, there's two other main things that I think a lot of people don't really think about when it comes to improving the like intent or improving what you get out of a training program. One of them is the environment, right? And I think this is something that I've gone back to a couple of times is like the environment you're in is gonna either support you or take away from you, right? And this goes both ways, nutrition and training, right? I think with nutrition, if you're living around a bunch of people who are like, well, I'm just going to KFC or I'm just going to McDonald's or I'm just gonna whatever, it's gonna be so hard to continue to push yourself and eat right when you know it's like, all right, I gotta cook this whole meal and they're just gonna go, buy it at McDonald's, right? And it's like that's where it's very hard and you have to kind of sacrifice people and put yourself in a position where there's people around to actually help you, right? And not take away from it because, you know, I've personally like, when I was going to lose weight, I just did it. Like I didn't really have, any problems. I didn't really have anybody stopping me from doing it. But I can see where people don't have supportive people or they have that because I've had it a couple times where it's like, oh, look at him, he's trying to lose weight, he's trying to blah blah blah. there's nothing worse than that. You know what I mean? Or when you're trying to eat healthy and there's people kind of like badgering you or just kind of making fun of you.
What do you think? You're better than me?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
something like that, where it's like, the environment has so much to do with what you get out of your nutrition program and the training, especially because, like, if you're in an environment where, say, like, for example, you go to Planet Fitness and you can't drop a weight, right? Where it's like, okay, well, I know I can't drop a weight, so it's like I got to be careful about what I push to. So it's like you're already at a spot where you're limiting yourself because of the environment that you're in, which means you're not going to reach your full potential and you're not going to get the most out of your training program. And that's a recipe for disaster, right? So that's the type of thing where it's like, if your environment can actually build you up and not take away from you, you're going to get the most out of it, right? If you have an environment where you're going in, you have supportive people, all the equipment you need, good space, even to a certain extent, music, and it's an environment where you see people working hard, they're pushing you, and this is why group fitness is such like a big thing now is that people are getting pushed and there's a community and there's environment, you're going to go way past what you would have, right? Like even again, bring it back to running just because I've been doing a lot of it. The runs I have with like Nick, for example, so much easier than the ones I have to do on my own.
Mhm.
It's like when I'm with like running with someone, it's like, all right, cool, he's pushing, I'm pushing. When I'm by myself, I'm like, all right, like I'm so much more tired than I feel like I did. Like I've run 11 miles with Nick in person, and it was like that sucked, but like cool. I run 8 miles on my own, and I'm like, I'm gonna die. Like this feels terrible.
Yeah.
It's just like I don't know if it's just like the aspect of having someone there, where it's like that makes such a difference. But to me, I've noticed the difference it makes, and I've noticed that it really truly like helps push people, right? Especially from a coach perspective. I've seen when people are by themselves, and I've seen when people are in a group and what they get out of the training program itself. And then the other thing, and this kind of goes hand in hand, is like, the mindset and psychology around this stuff too is like, what do you think about it, right? Like, are you going into fitness and just be like, "Ah, like I don't want to do this. Like, this is just, I hate this, right? Like, I'm dreading being here. I'm dreading being in the situation. I don't want to be in the gym. I hate this place. Like, that's so important when you walk in. If you're not excited to be there, of course, it's going to be shitty, and you're probably not going to push yourself, and you're probably not going to get anything out of it. And nutrition wise, if you hate eating healthy or you hate the process of doing it, it's going to be miserable when it's like, all right, I got to cut this chicken, I got to weigh it. Oh my God, I got to take this bone. Like it's just going to be like this process of like, it's going to be annoying. Like literally, that's all I can say. It's going to be terribly annoying. So like for you and people who are listening to this, if you can shift the way you think about it, and it's as simple as not as the corny like I get to do this, I get to do that type of thing, but really it matters. It really does if you go in and you're like, I get to go train, like I get to go lift, I get to go push my body, I get to go push the limits of what I get to do, and I get to see what it feels like to be like the best version of myself. Like I was just at a CPR course today, and we were doing the compressions. And the lady was kind of like, oh, well, if you were by yourself, not to me, but like to the group, she's like, how long do you really think you could go for? Like before you had to stop. And I was like, I don't know. I felt like I could have gone all fucking day. Like I was just
Yeah.
going like at the
I'm a
at the
fucking
pace I
champ
needed
right
to go.
now. Yeah.
And it's not, well, it's just like, and then you see, I was next to a lady who couldn't even get the thing to go down on the
Yeah.
on the CPR machine or on the like the dummy. Like she
Yeah.
was pushing and pushing and just like wasn't getting the depth that she needed. And the lady was like, well, I like you have to get the depth. I can't like pass you if you can't get the depth. And she was like going, and then she got it for like 5, and then she couldn't go anymore. I'm like that's crazy. Like, obviously there's size difference. I'm a lot bigger, but it's just those types of things where it's like, you know, where when I work out, it's like this is what I do it for, to stand out. I don't not say stand out, but like, if I need to do this for a half hour, I should be able to do it. You know what I mean? And that's the type of thing where it's like this is where what we do and how we kind of surround ourselves with people, how we make the decisions, how we set our life
And
skills.
the winner of the 12th annual Hunger Games is
I should change this next. I'm gonna change this next time.
when it's
It's
done, just have it go. Ah!
it's such a distraction. Like that video I sent you. Ah. There was another one, bro. I'm not gonna mention it on here, but there was another one. Anyways,
Yeah.
um, yeah, so I'd like getting the mindset and psychology about how you feel about fitness and how you feel about nutrition. Like it makes things so much easier. And when you do that, like again, it kind of starts at the environment, right? It starts about setting yourself up because I can go everything I said about nutrition, I could say about fitness as well, right? Like these are both skills where it's like if I tell you to squat and I start having you back squat and you've never back squatted in your life, you're probably not going to get much out of that in regards to intensity or volume or progression, right? But if I say, okay, we're going to start with a goblet squat, we're going to work our way up, you're going to get a lot out of that, right? So it's like my job as a coach and your job as a client to say, what can I do? What do I think I can do? And the coach's job is to kind of be like, all right, well, you think you can do this. I think we could go a little bit further, right? And as we start to blend these together, if you understand the choices of the food that you're making, the skills that you have in the kitchen, the environment that you're in, and when and why you eat, you're gonna get so much more out of your nutrition program. And when you look at that macro list of protein, carbs, and fats, it's gonna be so much more relaxing, and you're gonna have so much more confidence and understand like, okay, now I know how I can do this, right? And as for the training, look at intensity first. See, can I actually give more than I am right now? A lot of people, the answer is going to say yes for the most part, right? Then if that's not the case, you know, what's my environment like? Am I in a place that's actually supporting me and helping me? And what do I think about this stuff? Like, is it something that I'm like dreading going to do? Maybe I need to change the type of program I'm doing. Maybe I need to be honest about the goals that I'm achieving and things like that. And, from there, if you can kind of take those things and blend them together, whatever you're doing, you're going to get more out of, right? And this is the biggest thing too, I will say to kind of like sum this up is that a training program is only as good as your ability to execute on it, right?
Hmm.
Like, and especially for the nutrition as well, it's like I could I could give you the best plan in the world, right? I could give you plans that I've in regards to performance or health or weight loss that like weight loss, I can tell you what I did exactly, right? But if you're not willing to do what I did inside of it, it's not going to work, right? And the same thing with a training program. If you're not willing to do what I did, then how can I can't guarantee you results, right? I can guarantee you if you do what it says, right? But to a certain extent, you have to be willing to put yourself out there, give yourself an opportunity to kind of sacrifice things and be willing to put yourself in kind of shitty situations for a little bit so that you can get the necessary skills and habits and learning curve so you can then do the things that you need to do inside the kitchen and then inside the gym. But yeah, anything to add?
The one thing that all of those have in common, and you kind of touched on it right there, is the consistency component.
Yeah.
The more you can consistently get good foods at the grocery store, consistently make high quality meals,
Yep.
consistently go to the gym and get high quality workouts, the more you consistently surround yourself with people who are like-minded and want the same level of success as you, whether in your career or fitness,
Hmm.
and the consistency of keeping yourself in the right mindset and constantly saying like I get to do this, I get to do this. And like you said, as corny as it is, I think about it all the time. There was a guy at the gym I used to work out at, and he was blind and he would always have his hand on his buddy's shoulder. And I used to think like he can't come to the gym without anybody else. I am lucky that I get to wake up, go to the gym on my own time, without having to worry about anyone else's schedule and get this workout in. Those are the things where, as corny as it seems, it's true. Like
Hmm.
you are lucky to be able to go. You're able-bodied. You can get yourself to go in there and get a good workout. You're able-bodied to go into the kitchen and cook and go to the grocery store, get quality ingredients. All of that is all consistency and mindset, and it all ties together.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to end it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you guys listen to this, if you're just starting out and you take these things into account, I think you're going to get a lot out of your training program. And yeah, it's time for me to go eat some chicken cutlet. So,
Whew.
uh,
Dang.
I can't wait. So, chicken cutlet and pasta. It's going down.
Oh my God.
Going in
Does it
this
fit your
well.
macros?
I don't, today's
Doesn't matter.
they don't count
Sunday
on
family dinner.
Sundays.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Oh, you'll see the guys. We will see you guys next time. That was a mess up. We will see you guys next time.
Slowly. Yeah.
Peace.